I pressed my badge against the scanner, just like I had for the past 15 years. Beep. Red. Access denied. I paused. Maybe my hand trembled too much. Maybe the scanner was acting up. I tried again, slower this time, bracing the lanyard with both hands. Beep. Red. Again. Behind me. A few employees walked past, their badges lighting green, as if nothing had changed, as if I wasn't standing there. One arm still weak from the stroke, watching the glass doors stay shut. The silence in that moment was louder than the machines in the warehouse floor. I turned slightly, looking at the security guard behind the front desk. Marcus. We knew each other by name. He used to greet me every Monday morning with a joke about my coffee order. He didn't joke today. He looked at me, then away, then back again. His lips tightened after a few seconds. He stood up slowly and walked over. I think there's a problem with my badge, I said, my voice softer than I meant. Can you check the system? Marcus hesitated. Then he leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. They said you were terminated last week, Rachel. But no one sent out the official memo. No one wanted to make the call. I didn't move. I didn't speak. My left fingers twitched as they did now. Ever since the stroke, it was the only movement I could manage. Terminated? I had been in a hospital bed for weeks, fighting to speak clearly again, to walk without assistance. I was recovering. I hadn't even been given a chance to return, to explain, to ask for time. Was this how they told people now? Through silence? I'm sorry, Marcus said gently. They removed your clearance last Thursday. I didn't want to say anything unless I was sure. I nodded once. Slowly. It was the only thing I could do without unraveling completely. Behind the glass, I saw someone from HR pass by. She saw me, but didn't stop. Her eyes shifted to her phone, and she turned down a hallway. That told me everything. No explanation, no conversation, not even a goodbye. Just a red light and locked doors. Outside. I stood still for a long time, my breath visible in the morning air, my hand still on the badge, and a question circling louder than the stroke itself. How do you erase 15 years without a word? It started like every other Tuesday. My Outlook calendar was stacked, back-to-back meetings from 8:30 a.m. until well past dinner. I hadn't eaten anything except half a protein bar and 3 cups of stale coffee. My team had flagged issues in a vendor compliance report, and I was the only one left who understood the old procurement framework, so I stayed late, again. By 6:35 p.m., I was on my final Zoom call of the day. Preston Lang, the CEO, had dialed in just long enough to bark about missed margins and demand a new projection model by morning. I remember saying, "That timeline isn't safe for the team. Preston, they've been working nonstop." There was silence. Two. Then his voice, flat and dismissive. "Don't make this emotional, Rachel. Just get it done." The call ended abruptly. No goodbye. I stared at the screen, still open, full of charts I had memorized. My hand was on the mouse, my spine locked, my head felt heavy. And then it hit. At first, I thought it was a migraine, a sharp, stabbing light behind my left eye. But when I tried to stand, my left foot buckled, my arm slid off the desk, limp. Words formed in my mind, but wouldn't leave my mouth. I was aware, fully aware, as my body betrayed me. I crashed onto the floor, couldn't reach my phone, couldn't even scream. The office was quiet, most had gone home, my vision blurred, then tunneled. I remember the sound of the HVAC humming overhead, the fluorescent lights flickering, my heart thudding wildly in my chest. And then, nothing. I woke up to the slow beep of machines, a nurse checking my vitals, a soft light coming from a window. I was in a hospital bed, IV in my arm, gown on my back, disoriented. I turned my head, It throbbed as if I had been split open and stitched back together. My voice cracked when I asked, "What time is it?" The nurse replied gently, "You had a stroke, sweetheart, a mild one, but it was close. You've been here 2 days." My mouth dried. My hand twitched. 2 days? I reached for my phone. Dead. The nurse handed it to me after charging it. Notifications flooded in. Missed calls, Slack pings, system alerts, calendar invites, and one email, sitting unopened at the top of my inbox. Subject: Employment status notification. Sent, 6:43 p.m., the night I collapsed. From hr@avamcorecorp.com, I opened it. Dear Rachel, as of today, Avamcore will be initiating a review of your continued employment due to unexplained absenteeism and non-response during active workflow cycles. Please consider this formal notification of performance-based concern. Regards, HR Department. No name, no warmth, no acknowledgement of my condition. Just a bureaucratic reprimand sent 1 minute after my body failed me. My breath caught in my throat. My pulse surged again. I turned the screen away and stared at the ceiling tiles above me. They knew I had collapsed. They had to. It could see my last system activity. My coworkers surely reported I hadn't logged back on. And yet, the email was still sent. In that moment, something inside me split. Not like the stroke that had hit my body. This hit something deeper. I was no longer just exhausted. I was disposable. And for the first time, the pain wasn't just physical, it was betrayal. Quiet and calculated. They were preparing to erase me before I even got a chance to stand up again. I spent the next few days in a dull haze of medications, blood pressure readings, and physical therapy evaluations every morning. The nurses helped me walk a little farther down the hall. My voice, slurred on the first day, had sharpened into something more stable, but still slower than before. What hadn't improved was the weight in my chest, not from the stroke, from the silence. By the fourth morning, I finally had the strength to sit upright, open my laptop, and try to reach someone at Avamcore. I told myself it was probably a misunderstanding, an automated email. Maybe. Something that slipped through the cracks. So I started simple. I called HR. The first number rang 5 times before redirecting to voicemail. I left a calm, professional message. No anger, no panic. Just me, Rachel Simmons, Director of Global Compliance, stating that I had been hospitalized, that I was recovering, and that I was ready to discuss next steps. No callback. I tried again 2 hours later, then again at the end of the day. I emailed twice, marked one as urgent. Still nothing. By the second day, I expanded my outreach. I tried my direct manager. Silence. I pinged an old colleague on Slack. The message showed delivered, but never read. It wasn't just oversight. I was being ghosted. I stared at my inbox, the cursor blinking next to the draft of yet another follow-up. The hospital window beside me let in a harsh light that made the screen hard to read. I angled it, only to catch a glimpse of my reflection, the dark circles under my eyes, the slope in my left shoulder, the fatigue carved into my skin. And then, it hit me. They weren't waiting to hear from me. They had already decided. That email, the one sent 1 minute after I collapsed, wasn't a warning. It was a curtain call. My breath hitched. I swallowed it down. This wasn't the time to cry. Not here. Not with wires still taped to my chest. Still, a part of me couldn't stop hoping that someone would reach out. Someone I had mentored, trained, supported. Anyone. That hope shattered late Thursday afternoon. My phone buzzed. A message from a familiar number. Angela. She'd been on my team for 6 years. A single mom, one of the brightest policy writers I'd ever hired. Angela, 2:14 p.m. Hey, Rachel. I heard. I'm so sorry. I wish I could say more. But I can't. I still need this job. I have my son. Please understand. I read it twice. Then again. I didn't blame her. But that didn't stop the sting. Angela wasn't betraying me. She was just surviving. Just like the others. Just like I had. Once. We had all stayed quiet when someone else disappeared, chalking it up to corporate churn. Budget decisions. Not my department. Now it was me. I set the phone down and leaned back against the pillows. My legs trembled from the physical therapy walk earlier that morning. My throat was dry. There was no meeting scheduled, no performance review, no documentation, just silence. They were trying to make me disappear without confrontation. No lawsuits, no paper trails. Just a void where Rachel used to be. And in the void, all I had was a broken body and a growing certainty. This wasn't incompetence. It was design. The next morning, I didn't bother calling HR. Instead, I called a lawyer, not to sue, not yet, just to ask a question. What happens if a company erases you while you're still recovering from a stroke? Her answer was simple. Depends if you have proof. Do you? I didn't answer, but I would. Soon, because if they were going to pretend I never existed, then I would make damn sure my silence became the loudest thing they'd ever hear. It was 9:26 a.m. when Carla walked into my room again. Same soft sneakers, same quiet kindness in her eyes. She wasn't my assigned nurse that day, but she lingered just a moment longer than usual. There was something about her presence that felt hesitant, like she had something to say, but wasn't sure she should. I was still propped up against the pillows. Flipping through a physical therapy pamphlet, I had no energy to read. The ache in my shoulder had dulled. But the fog in my chest, that dense, heavy sense of erasure, hadn't lifted. Not since Angela's message. Not since the calls that went unanswered. Carla checked my blood pressure in silence. Then she looked toward the door, made sure it was closed, and finally spoke. You worked at Avamcor, right? She asked. Almost casually. I nodded, cautious. 15 years. Her eyes flickered. My brother used to work there. Finance. He left last year. Not by choice. That caught my attention. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small black flash drive. She held it between two fingers, like it might burn her. He made a copy of some internal files before he left, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know what was on it. I didn't ask. But when I saw your name on the hospital board... She placed the flash drive gently on the tray beside my bed. He said if anything ever happened to him, or to someone like him, I should give this to them. I think it was meant for someone who got pushed out unfairly. I stared at the flash drive. It was simple, unlabeled, innocent-looking, but my hands shook slightly when I reached for it. Why are you giving this to me? I asked, my throat dry. Carla didn't smile. She didn't explain further. She just said, because what they did to you isn't right. Then she turned and left. The door whispering closed behind her. Back in my apartment 3 days later, the first time I had slept in my own bed since the stroke, I finally opened the drive. There were folders, dozens of them, internal memos, departmental reports, flagged compliance notes, audit meeting recordings, all neatly labeled by quarter and department. I clicked on one that read, 2023 Q4 Workforce Risk Assessment.pdf. I scanned through it, my heart pounding harder with each line. The report categorized every senior employee by risk level, cost versus output, projected health liabilities, insurance premium trends. And there it was. Employee ID 003241. Name, Rachel Simmons. Position, Director. Global Compliance Insurance Cost, Tier 4. Q4. Status. Productivity, uncertainty, flagged. Evaluate exit strategy if workload impact continues. The words were sharp, clinical, cold. Evaluate exit strategy. That was corporate speak for, "She's becoming too expensive. Get rid of her." It wasn't just me. Dozens of other names followed, most of them over 50, most flagged as Tier 3 or Tier 4. A few had little red exclamation marks next to them. I didn't know what those meant, but I had a guess. For a moment. I just sat there. The apartment around me was quiet, the kind of silence that felt unnatural, too still. Outside, New York moved on like it always did, but inside my chest, something cracked open. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't paranoid. They had been planning this, long before the stroke. And now, sitting here with this drive in my hands, I had something they didn't expect. Proof. Not just of carelessness, but of calculation. Of a system that treated people like line items on a spreadsheet, weighed against premiums and margins, then quietly deleted. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling just enough to make me feel human again. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift beneath the grief. It wasn't anger yet, it wasn't power, but it was something close. Hope. Frail, fragile, but real. And I knew one thing for sure: if I'd been marked as a risk to manage, I was about to become the problem they couldn't contain. I didn't sleep that night. The flash drive sat beside me on the kitchen table, still plugged into my laptop. Its contents now lived in 2 backups, one on a cloud drive, another on an encrypted external hard disk I hadn't touched in years. I moved slowly, still nursing the stiffness in my shoulder and the tightness in my chest, but my mind was moving at full speed. By 3:00 a.m., I was deep inside the folders Carla's brother had left behind. The sheer volume of files was staggering. He hadn't just collected snapshots. He had downloaded an entire living memory of Avamcor's internal decisions. And the deeper I went, the more the rage settled into my bones. There were emails between mid-level HR managers, joking about incentivizing burnout to speed up department turnovers. Spreadsheets that tracked employee hours against insurance burden. Slack messages flagging staff members who requested medical leave as operational drag. What disgusted me most wasn't the language. It was the tone. Cold, efficient, normalized. One email, dated 4 months before my stroke, had a subject line that read, "Tier 4s to watch, Q3 review." I opened it. The body was short, direct. "Begin exit preparation for the following if productivity trends continue. Consider internal justification strategies, non-disciplinary preferred." My name wasn't on that list. Yet. But 2 others were. Cynthia Valdez, 59. Senior Logistics Analyst Samuel Ung, 62. Risk Management Lead, I remembered them. Both had worked in the same building. Cynthia had gone silent one day, just stopped showing up. HR later told us she'd chosen to take early retirement. Samuel's desk had been empty for weeks before we were told he'd accepted a consultant position elsewhere. I believed it then. I didn't question it. I opened a secondary file, a bundled document folder titled Incident Reports, Confidential. Hidden inside was a collection of scanned incident summaries. Most had nothing to do with compliance. They were flagged medical. Cynthia Valdez. Reported fainting during vendor audit call. Advised to go home. Filed PTO request. Denied. Samuel Ung. Reported high blood pressure and fatigue. Requested ergonomic accommodations. Request denied. Then another name. Gerald Watts. 60. Accounts receivable. Collapsed in parking garage. Paramedics called. No follow-up documented. There was no email about his return. No update in the staff newsletter. No farewell lunch. Just a disappearance. Just like mine. I leaned back, heart thudding. 3 strokes. 3 employees. 3 quiet exits. They hadn't just erased me. I was part of a pattern, a system, a method. Suddenly, the term workforce risk felt less like HR jargon and more like a quiet death sentence. The rage didn't come all at once. It built slowly. With each line I read, it threaded itself tighter around my chest. I remembered the nights I worked until 10 p.m., the missed birthdays, the double shifts, the Sunday calls. I remembered staying late to coach junior analysts. I remembered rewriting audit responses at the last minute to make our board look cleaner than it deserved. And now I knew they weren't grateful. They were preparing my replacement while I was still putting out fires. At 4:40 a.m., I closed my laptop and just sat there. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I felt something settle in me, something heavy and sharp. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was a company that had been systematically discarding its most experienced people the moment they became inconvenient, disguising it as transitions, wrapping it in the language of professionalism. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't bad luck. It was deliberate. And now, thanks to a nurse with a brother who saw too much and cared enough, I had the receipts. I would give them what they never gave me: a documented response, a consequence, no press release, no quiet exit. I was going to speak, and this time, they'd have no place to hide. By 7:15 a.m., I was dressed, hair pulled back tight, and seated in front of my laptop with 2 cups of coffee, one for drinking, the other to remind myself I was still functioning like I used to. The sun bled into the apartment through half-drawn blinds, catching dust in the air. I hadn't slept, but I didn't need sleep. I needed answers. The files Carla had given me weren't just suspicious, they were damning. What I didn't know yet was whether any of it could be used, or whether the company would bury me all over again, just this time in legal silence. So I searched. I typed one phrase into the browser: Employment Discrimination / Recovery Labor Attorney, New York. The results came up fast, but one listing stood out. Olivia Hart, Attorney, Labor Law and Employee Rights. We don't just defend workers, we rebuild them. It sounded like a pitch, but I was out of better ideas. I clicked Book a Consultation. By 9:40 a.m., we were on a video call. Olivia looked young, maybe early 30s, but focused. Sharp eyes, no small talk. "Tell me what happened," she said simply. I told her everything. The late nights, the stroke, the silence, the badge that didn't work, and then the flash drive. I showed her the risk report, scrolled through the list of names, including mine. I even let her hear one of the recorded planning calls from a folder labeled Q4 Staffing Adjustments. The voice on the other end? I was certain it was Preston Lang, the CEO himself, coldly advising his team to preemptively transition high-cost employees before year-end. Olivia listened without interrupting. Occasionally, she jotted something down. When I finally finished, I asked, "So, do I have a case?" She leaned forward. "You don't just have a case," she said. "You have a blueprint." I blinked. A blueprint? This isn't just wrongful termination. Rachel, this is systemic discrimination based on health status, and possibly age. The emails, the risk tier system, the denial of leave requests. It all fits a pattern, a class action pattern. The air in my lungs shifted, not quite relief, but something close. The tightness in my chest remained. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was the heat of something stirring. "But here's the catch," Olivia said. "You need to be smart, strategic. If we go public too soon, they'll lock down their files, shred documents, erase emails. We need to move quietly, build, then strike." I nodded, jaw clenched. "I've waited this long." She smirked. "Good, then let's start. First, I need to know who else on that list still works there." I paused, then opened the file again. The names scrolled past. "I can find out. One of them still messages me sometimes. Jenna, she's still inside." Later that day, I reached out to Jenna. I didn't say much, just that I was looking into something important, and that her name had come up. I didn't ask for anything yet. Her response came 20 minutes later. Jenna, 2:47 p.m. I figured it was only a matter of time. They're already watching me, but I've saved what I could. Tell me what you need. I stared at the screen. Something shifted. For the first time since I collapsed on that office floor. Since I stared into hospital lights, not knowing if I'd ever walk straight again. I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel erased. I had allies. I had proof. And now, I had Olivia. Was I scared? Yes. Still fragile? Still unsteady in a body that had betrayed me. But the anger that once sat buried beneath my ribs had turned into fuel. Controlled. Directional. I wasn't healed, not yet. But I had a path. And for the first time, I was the one drawing the map. I didn't expect the email, not from her, not from anyone inside. I had just finished another call with Olivia, discussing how we'd need more hard evidence that tied the risk tier system to executive action, something irrefutable, something they couldn't spin as policy abstraction. She mentioned needing at least one person currently inside the company, someone who had seen the gears turn. I'd mentioned Jenna's name in passing, but I didn't dare reach out again. Too dangerous. Too soon. But then, 9:28 a.m., a message popped into my inbox from a private Proton Mail address. No signature, no subject, just one line in the body. I've seen what they're doing. You're not crazy. I stared at the screen. My breath caught between a gasp and a question. My first instinct was skepticism. Phishing? A trap? But something about the rhythm of that sentence felt familiar. Jenna used to say that exact phrase when we were still working late on audit proposals. I replied with one word. Safe? 30 minutes passed. Then a response. Safe-ish. I'm using my own device. Encrypted connection. Can't write long. I can't keep this on me for long either. Attached was a single image file. A screenshot. I clicked it. Zoomed in. It was from the internal HRIS, Avamcore's internal time tracking and productivity dashboard. I recognized the layout instantly, but something was off. Each employee line had 3 values: clock in, clock out, productivity, score compliance flag, and then, highlighted in red at the bottom, a note next to one of the rows. Retroactive adjustment applied to PTO record. Do not trigger absence protocol. Flagged for quiet transition. I zoomed out to see the name. It wasn't mine. It was someone else. Someone still there. But that phrase, quiet transition, that was the same phrase from my own workforce risk file. This wasn't just theory anymore. It was active. They were editing records, manipulating the system, prepping terminations before people even knew they were targets. My pulse spiked. Another message arrived. That's from 2 weeks ago. I pulled it before they wiped the log. Another file followed. This one a screen recording, less than 10 seconds long. A mouse moved over the name, clicked an override drop-down, and flagged the employee for offboarding, without notifying them. I sat frozen, watching, replaying it twice. Jenna was risking everything. I typed a reply. Why are you doing this? Her response came quickly. Because I'm next, and because you were the only one who ever looked me in the eye when I spoke. That hit harder than I expected. Jenna was barely 30. When she joined, she was quiet, meticulous, always over-prepared. I had taken her under my wing, coached her through her first 2 performance cycles. I remembered telling her, compliance isn't just about rules, it's about people. Never forget that. Apparently, she hadn't. But even as hope stirred, I knew we had to tread carefully. Jenna's name could never be mentioned, not to Olivia, not in any deposition, not even whispered. I encrypted the files, renamed them, and sent a sanitized version to Olivia without metadata. Anonymous internal source, I told her. No contact, no trail. She didn't press. She just said, "This is gold," later that night. I stared out my window as traffic lights flickered across the street. I should have felt triumphant. We had a direct thread tying current manipulation to the broader risk system. It was enough to put someone on the stand, if we played it right. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt responsible. Jenna was still in there, still waking up every day under those same fluorescent lights I once collapsed beneath. And now, she'd tied herself to me. The war wasn't over, not yet. But for the first time in a long time, I had something more than proof. I had someone who believed me. And in that fragile, flickering space between fear and courage, I felt something rebuild, trust, quiet, cautious, but alive. By the time Olivia called again, the early October sun had already started to slant lower in the sky, the kind of light that turns gold before it disappears. I was sitting at my desk in a sweatshirt, tea going cold beside my laptop. Jenna's files open in front of me, half highlighted. I didn't expect much from this call. A check-in, a timeline review, maybe strategy. But when Olivia's face appeared on the screen, there was something different in her eyes, a focused intensity, sharpened at the edges. "I found something," she said without preamble. I straightened. "What kind of something?" She held up a document, a scanned copy of a public filing, and turned it toward the camera. Avamcor's 2022 corporate restructuring documents. I pulled them from the Department of Labor archives. "Let me guess," I said. "Something they forgot to include?" Her smile was tight, controlled. "They never renewed their employee protections addendum after the merger." I blinked. "Wait, that's required for continued compliance with Title I of the ADA and the new EEOC remote health guidelines, right?" "Exactly," she said. "And it gets better. Without that renewal, every denied medical leave or offboarding that references health impact is legally exposed. That includes you, but not just you." She sent me another file. It opened slowly on my aging laptop, but when it did, I felt my breath hitch. A list, names, titles, all familiar. Angela, Samuel, Cynthia, even Gerald Watts, the man who had collapsed in the parking garage. 17 names total. 17 former employees who had either been pushed out or quietly transitioned following a flagged medical incident. Olivia had built a working database overnight, and that's when it clicked. "This isn't just about wrongful termination," I said. She nodded. "It's class action." For a moment, neither of us spoke, but something unspoken passed between us. A shared understanding, the magnitude, the risk, and the chance, the once-in-a-lifetime chance, to expose a system that didn't just forget people. It engineered their disappearance. My heart beat faster, not with panic, but with precision, with quiet, focused adrenaline. For the first time in months, I wasn't reacting, I was preparing. "So what do we do next?" I asked. Olivia replied, calm as ever. "We verify each name, establish timelines, secure testimonials. Once we hit the 5th corroborated case with identical patterns, we file. That triggers subpoena power, and if Preston Lang tries to hide behind internal policy," I finished for her, "we show that he knowingly operated under expired federal compliance." And that was the dagger. He couldn't hide behind legal shielding if he had knowingly failed to update the protections. He would be exposed as both reckless and negligent, not just to employees, but to regulators, investors, and the public. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. A low, slow breath escaped me. Not triumphant, not relieved, just steady. A quiet kind of power. The kind that doesn't shout, the kind that waits. This wasn't some emotional revenge story anymore. This was strategy, structured, methodical. just like the audits I used to run for them. Only now, they were the ones being examined. And the irony? Delicious. I clicked back into the shared folder and opened the name list again. I started tagging each employee I remembered working with. Notes, timelines, when they left, what the rumors were, who had replaced them. My fingers moved without hesitation. I knew this company inside and out. I had built its compliance framework. And now, that same framework, the one they thought they could bury me with, was about to become my weapon. Outside, traffic buzzed below my apartment window. The world moved on, unaware, but inside that little rectangle of light on my screen, something much bigger had begun. Not rage, not grief, just something far more dangerous. A woman with receipts and a plan. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and sealed with a subtle gold-embossed A. It arrived by courier at 11:15 a.m. sharp. The timing didn't surprise me. Olivia had warned they might try something soon. What did surprise me, though, was how quiet it felt to receive it. No warning shot, no phone call, just a packet, as if my erasure could be wrapped in paper and FedExed away. I opened it slowly. Inside, a neatly typed letter from Avamcor's legal team and a 14-page settlement agreement. The headline was clear. Settlement proposal, $300,000 USD, in exchange for the enclosed sum. The undersigned party, Rachel Simmons, agrees to the following: immediate and unconditional withdrawal of any and all legal action, destruction of all documentation obtained during employment or after departure, non-disclosure of all conversations, findings, or internal materials now or in the future, a public statement confirming amicable resolution. My hands went cold as I flipped to the back page, where a line awaited my signature. No apology, no admission of fault, just money, just silence, a check written in exchange for my dignity. I let the pages fall flat on the table. An hour later, Olivia joined me on a video call. She didn't look surprised. "It's a classic move," she said. "Buy the silence before the voice gets too loud." "It's insulting," I replied. "They think this is about money." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" "No," I said, my voice sharp. "It never was." I stood up, paced slowly across my living room, the same room where I had recovered, broken and ignored, while they sent HR notices timed to my collapse. I thought about Cynthia, Gerald, Samuel. I thought about Jenna still sitting under those lights, probably checking her shoulder every time a manager passed by. I thought about my own hands trembling on the hospital bed while the world moved on, and I thought about what it would mean if I signed that paper, if I took the money and disappeared like they wanted me to. I'd become one more redacted file, another vanishing, another erased risk. And that made my skin crawl. I turned back to Olivia. "I want them in court." She nodded slowly. "Then we move forward." But I wasn't done. I pulled out a pen, flipped to the last page of the settlement offer, and wrote 4 words in bold black ink across the signature line. "See you in court." Then I slid the paper back into the envelope and resealed it. That evening, I sent an encrypted message to Jenna. "They made me an offer." I said no. "We move." Her reply came within minutes. "Good. They're nervous. It has started deleting internal logs. I'll send you what I pulled before they wiped it." My chest tightened, not with panic, but with resolve. The house of cards was shaking, and we had barely lifted the first layer. Later that night, I opened a clean document on my laptop and began typing. It was a summary, a record, a ledger of what they had done, not just to me, but to the 17. Each name, each date, each tactic. I wasn't sure where I'd publish it yet, but I would. Maybe it would be evidence. Maybe it would be the first chapter of a testimony. Maybe it would simply be the truth, finally laid bare. What mattered was this: I wasn't taking their money. I wasn't taking their silence. And I sure as hell wasn't taking their amicable resolution. They wanted me quiet. I'd give them the opposite. Because sometimes, the most powerful word isn't shouted, it isn't screamed, it isn't even spoken. It's written, firmly, clearly, on the line where they thought they bought your silence. See you in court. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Fluorescent lighting, pale gray carpet, that faint, sterile smell. Like too much air conditioning and not enough oxygen. I sat at the plaintiff's table, Olivia beside me, a thick folder of exhibits between us. I kept my hands still in my lap, my fingers locked together to hide the way they trembled. Not from fear, not anymore, but from everything I'd held back for too long. Across the room sat Preston Lang. He looked exactly as I remembered. Charcoal suit, expensive watch, hair styled within an inch of perfection. He leaned slightly back in his chair, one leg crossed over the other. That signature half-smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. The same one I'd seen on Zoom calls, board meetings, and investor presentations. Like this wasn't a trial, just another quarterly review. He didn't even glance at me, but I saw him. I saw everything. The way he whispered to his attorney, how he didn't bring a single piece of paper to the table because men like Preston didn't need to prepare. They assumed the room would bend around them. I didn't move, I didn't flinch, but inside, something burned. I wasn't angry in the way I used to be, raw and shaking. No. This was colder, finer. A refined rage that had been sharpened into something precise. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge entered. Opening remarks were brief, formalities. Both sides agreed on basic facts. My employment history, the date of my medical episode, the termination notice, the lack of medical accommodation. Then Olivia stood. She moved with purpose, calm, composed, every word measured. This case is about more than one employee. It's about a system, a culture designed to extract everything from its people, then discard them when they become inconvenient. She paused, then turned slightly toward the jury. And we will show you, in their own words, their own data, how that system was built. Preston didn't react. Still leaning. Still that smug little grin. Then it was our turn to present evidence. Olivia handed me the clicker. We had agreed I would tell part of the story, my voice, my experience, my body. They needed to hear it from me. I stood up slowly, walked to the display screen, and took a breath that filled every inch of my ribs. Click. The first slide came up. A scanned image. My hospital intake report from the day of the stroke. Click. A dated Slack message from an HR manager. Rachel Simmons is out. Can we initiate her exit protocol? Time-stamped 14 minutes after I collapsed. Click. And then I pulled the final image from the folder. Not on screen, but printed. Glossy. Real. My brain scan. From the night it happened. I walked it to the jury box, held it up. The room went quiet. This is my brain, I said, 47 minutes after I collapsed at my desk, after a 14-hour day, after a Zoom call where I told the CEO that my team needed a break. I turned, this time, looking directly at Preston. He met my eyes now, briefly. I raised the scan higher. Is this what made me disposable? I asked the jury. Wait, is this what turned me into a liability? Not a single juror blinked. I returned to my seat. My hands were still, my heart, loud, but contained. I could feel Olivia's quiet nod beside me. Preston looked forward again, but the smirk was gone. He picked up a pen for the first time and began scribbling something on a legal pad. I saw that, too, that night. I sat alone in my apartment, lights low, phone on silent. The adrenaline had passed, but the resolve remained. I had stood in front of strangers and held up the proof of what they did to me. Not in theory, not in metaphor, but in scans and blood work and timestamps they couldn't erase. They had reduced me to a number. But today, I gave that number a voice. And tomorrow, I'd give it a verdict. The second day of the trial felt different. The courtroom was no less cold, no less clinical, but something in the air had shifted. Maybe it was the way Preston Lang tapped his pen more often, or the way his legal team huddled tighter than the day before. His posture had changed. Not much. Just a hair. Less relaxed. Less certain. I noticed it, and I knew why. Today was Olivia's turn. She stood, calm as ever, and began with a voice low but unwavering. No theatrics, no raised volume, just quiet control, the kind of presence that demands attention without asking for it. Your Honor, today we present 2 pieces of evidence, she began. One from a current employee, one from a former employee's family, together. They outline a pattern of deliberate disregard for employee health, carried out at the executive level. A murmur rippled through the room. Olivia continued, unshaken. Exhibit 43, a screen recording from the Avamcore internal HR dashboard, captured prior to data deletion protocols. Provided anonymously, it shows administrative overrides of employee time-off requests and quiet activation of offboarding protocols tied to medical status. She hit a key, and the screen lit up. It was Jenna's file. We had blurred names and metadata for her protection, but the footage was intact. The mouse clicked through tabs, adjusted a field labeled Override Absence Protocol, and ticked a drop-down labeled Transition Health Flag. Several jurors leaned forward. Exhibit 44, Olivia said, is a confidential internal risk assessment report recovered from a flash drive preserved by a former employee. This document lists 47 staff members categorized by insurance burden, with notes including evaluate for Q4 exit, and in one case, minimize exposure before incident becomes visible. I felt a chill, even though I had read that line a dozen times. Ladies and gentlemen, Olivia said, turning to the jury, this is not negligence. This is architecture, a system designed to break people just before they become too expensive. Across the room, Preston finally looked up. His jaw flexed, his pen stopped tapping. The judge asked, does the defense wish to respond at this time? His lead counsel stood, but didn't object. Instead, he asked for a recess, a 15-minute break. Granted. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Olivia leaned close. We just turned the knife, she said quietly. Now it's time to twist. I gave her a puzzled look. She opened her binder, flipped to a legal brief, and pointed. He never renewed his personal liability insurance, not since 2021. Avamcore has blanket coverage. Yes, but the clauses exclude executive decisions made with knowledge of risk and disregard for federal compliance. It took me a second to process it. You mean? She nodded. If the jury finds personal fault, Preston pays, not the company, not the shareholders. Him! I felt the air leave my lungs like a slow-release valve. Not in shock, not in triumph, in something deeper. When we returned, Olivia laid it out cleanly for the judge and jury. The expired policy, the intentional disregard of ADA compliance, the digital proof, the chain of command, the pattern. Preston stared forward, jaw locked. A small muscle pulsed in his temple. I wondered if anyone else saw it. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights dimmed and my laptop open, the scan of Preston's original insurance filing on one side, and the employee health risk matrix on the other. I felt a stillness I hadn't known in months. Not joy, not revenge, just something heavy and deserved. The kind of satisfaction that doesn't make you smile. It just lets you breathe again. And yet, even in that breath, pain lingered, because no ruling could undo the stroke, No verdict could return the nights I lost alone in a hospital bed, wondering if I would walk again. No fine could erase the feeling of a badge not scanning, of silence where recognition once lived. But this was justice. Not clean, not easy, but real. They had tried to price me out of my own worth. And now, he'd pay every last dollar of what he thought I wasn't worth. The verdict came down on a crisp Tuesday morning, the kind where the autumn light feels too clean, too still. The courtroom was silent when the foreperson stood and read the decision. Guilty of wrongful termination. Guilty of health-based discrimination. Guilty of deliberate neglect under federal compliance statutes. Preston Lang sat motionless as the judge confirmed the damages. $74 million. Payable not by Avamcor, but by him, personally. The moment passed without outburst, without cheers. It didn't feel like a movie ending. It felt quiet, like the sound a door makes when it finally, mercifully, clicks shut behind you. Avamcor's stock began to fall the same afternoon. By end of week, 3 board members had resigned. HR leadership was placed under investigation. The firm issued a public statement filled with all the right buzzwords: culture renewal, employee first restructuring, deep regret. But no one was listening anymore. Especially not me. 2 months later, I registered the paperwork for a nonprofit, the Rachel Clause, a fund and a promise, built for workers who, like me, had given too much and been tossed aside the moment they became inconvenient. We started small. 1 pro bono attorney, 1 crisis counselor, and a folder full of names collected during discovery. The first week, we got 12 calls. The second, 52. By the end of the first month, we had applications from 6 states. I didn't speak at Preston's asset hearing. I didn't need to. Watching his lakefront home and downtown penthouse go on auction while his legal team scrambled to negotiate liens was enough. He lost more than money. He lost the illusion that people like him are untouchable. And yet, with every win, something remained. Mornings were the hardest. I'd wake early, instinctively reaching for the laptop like I used to. But the rhythm was different now. Slower. My left hand still trembled when I tried to lift a full mug of coffee. On rainy days, the stiffness returned to my shoulder. The fatigue wasn't just in the muscles, it lived in the marrow. Justice. Yes. But some wounds don't get reversed. They only get named. One morning, Olivia called to tell me the final settlements had cleared. Every name on the original list had received compensation. Jenna, now safely out of Avamcor, had started writing a book. Angela, with her son now in college, had begun working for a firm with real benefits and real boundaries. "I hope it's enough," Olivia said. "It's never enough," I replied, softly. "But it's a start." I keep the brain scan in a drawer, not framed, not on display, but I know it's there. A reminder, not of weakness, but of what it costs to survive a system designed to erase you. And sometimes, when the nights are especially quiet, I find myself whispering one truth out loud, the one that doesn't make headlines but lives in my bones. I got justice, but my left hand still shakes every morning. No verdict gives you back time.